Hi, everyone, and welcome back. In the next three PowerPoints, we're going to talk about three different types of naturalistic teaching. So there's a couple different package programs and different ways to do this, and they all are very similar. I think while this was getting popular, multiple researchers were working on it and sort of trying to develop a protocol for us. And they sort of developed all at the same time. And so we have these multiple protocols. And what's going to happen is your agency will probably preference one over another, and you'll be trained further on that specific method. They all have research backing them. They all have a lot of similarities. They were all developed around the same time. And I just think it's helpful to understand that and see a couple different types within this course. Incidental teaching will be our first one. It's a child-led teaching method embedded in everyday routines and activities. The learner will always initiate interaction, so you wouldn't engage with the child until they showed some sort of interest in a specific item or activity. And the instructor models language, whatever language that you would like to see from the child, and prompts responses. So reinforcement is directly related to the learner's request. So the core principles is first, you're waiting for the learner to initiate always. So you wait for them. You can arrange the environment, which we'll talk about, but you're going to wait for them to show interest in something, whether that's a gesture, word, gaze. You're going to arrange the materials so the learner needs help. And that's another big key with this is they do a lot of, I gave this example before, but hey, you want to paint? Yes. Or they show interest in painting and you might not have the paintbrush out. So they have to ask for the paintbrush. So one of the main goals of incidental teaching is to train an individual to ask for the things they need or want in the moment. With incidental, we're always doing least to most. So if you don't have to prompt, you don't prompt, and this will evoke language. With incidental, they wouldn't give extra reinforcement. They only use the natural reinforcement. So if a child asks for a paintbrush, the natural reinforcement is just to get the paintbrush. I think most people praise like, oh, thank you for asking, but you wouldn't give them, oh, do you want some time with this car right now? Your reinforcer, your favorite toy, because you asked me for something. You always utilize that natural. When we set up the environments, we're going to place all the preferred items right out of reach. So the learner needs to ask to access them. We're making sure that they're just out of reach. We're going to use textured, colorful, or novel materials. So you try to keep the materials really engaging, continually change them and make them fun. The learner is very motivated to ask for the materials. You often keep multiple copies of common items. So you're preventing frustration if the learner can't immediately access their desired item. And you want to rotate the items to maintain novelty and motivation, so switch up available materials. Again, when you're if you do a lot of naturalistic teaching, hopefully your company gives you a budget or provides this for you. But for me, because I was a supervisor, I often purchased most of the stuff, and I often would just purchase for my RBTs. But you're looking always for the new toys. That becomes a thing. I was on Pinterest and all these looking for any kind of brand new toy. It's the best way to keep your learners engaged is to have that new material and novel material. So you want to identify your teaching moment. So you want to observe your learners' nonverbal cues. So you're looking for them to point, reach, eye gaze towards something. And when they do that, then you want to elicit that request. Pause and give them time to respond. And this gets back to processing issue I talked about. A lot of people have long processing time, and we don't want to prompt before they process. If they need to process for a minute to request an item, you give them that minute. Later on, you might want to look at latency on some of that stuff, but in this initial phase of getting them to start requesting items, you want to always give them processing time. It can feel very unnatural and awkward to do that, but it's the best thing you can do. You just want to get used to that. If you ever go into mental health or whatever, you have to be comfortable with silence. Just be really comfortable with silence. Capture both planned and unplanned opportunities. You'll have these moments that you planned to provide an opportunity to like request something, learn something, a learning opportunity. And then the naturally unplanned opportunities arise, and you want to get good at capturing those unplanned opportunities. Like they're painting with the paintbrush they requested and they want a smaller brush. You didn't know they'd want that smaller brush. You're not planning for that, but that you want to make sure you're capturing that learning opportunity as well. And you want to be documenting frequency and type of initiations, because that's mainly what we're focusing on is initiations in this type of. So least to most hierarchy, this is the way we're going to prompt. And we do have a whole prompting section after this. So natural cue is like a point or a gesture to the item. What we mean is in another environment with an untrained person, so not a behavior tech, not a BCBA, not a supervisor, no one doing ABA. In most cases, an adult or even a child is going to point to the item for somebody else. If you see someone having trouble with speaking or asking for something, you might say, "Oh, is that what you want?" That's the natural response. We can utilize that the most because when they're not with us and in an environment with an untrained person, that's what they'll probably do. If they get used to that, they're going to be able to engage with the environment and that person the most. Then you can verbal prompt after that, so provide a part of the world. Then you might want a model prompt, so demonstrate the complete word or phrase, and then you might want a physical prompt, hand over hand. But we always try to start with natural cues and move down. It depends on what you're doing, whether you would use a verbal prompt or not. If it is a verbalization, you would use a verbal prompt. And there's probably not a way to physical prompt a verbalization. But if it's a physical thing, you want to start with natural, move to model what you want them to do. If that still doesn't work, we would move to that physical prompt. But the physical prompts always last. So we're going to give the learner exactly what they asked for. So whatever they ask for, you provide it. If it's cracker, toy, whatever, and you always provide it in this sort of arrangement. You don't stop providing it until it gets excessive, and that's a conversation with the team. So if they're always asking for a cookie all through your incidental teaching and they just want cookies the whole time, you might have a conversation like every 10 times they ask, we might give them a cookie or something. And it's interrupting because they have to eat it and you're not playing as much. Pair verbal response with reinforcement. So you want to say great asking. So you add that praise every time you deliver the reinforcement to make sure they know that you're satisfied with their progress. You want to fade your prompts quickly so they start independently asking for items and build complexity over time. So start with single words and then move to bigger phrases like cookie, please. We record initiations with incidental teaching. It's usually a tally, so it's spontaneous requests. We track the prompt level, so you want to be tracking how many natural cues you're giving, how many verbal, model, physical prompts you're giving. You want to measure their independence, calculate the number of independent initiations each week. When I've utilized this, we go into incidental teaching for part of their therapy. And when we're in that incidental teaching time, we're tracking initiations. And it's more or less, I arrange the environment with toys, but they're choosing what they want. It's all their initiation. And then we're engaging in play together. And I'm trying to get them to make those verbal requests. And we're tracking how much they initiate on their own, how much I have to prompt. And then we end that data collection when we move to DTT or other programs. You should always review your data to make sure, should we use different materials? Am I prompting too much? Should I be giving them more time to process before prompting? This is an incidental data sheet I made. So time, initiation, yes or no, and then you would put the prompt, response, reinforcement. And then you just have sheets of this, and this is what we're tracking throughout. Okay, so your role, what you do with this is one, the first thing is you want to arrange and maintain your teaching environment. So set up the space with the preferred items just out of reach. Use novel materials to capture attention and rotate those items. Observe for those interest cues, like they're looking at something, they're pointing to something, they're moving towards something, so you can start your teaching moment. So if they're looking at something, you may want to prompt them to request for that something, whatever it may be. You're going to implement the prompts as outlined. So least to most prompting hierarchy. So natural cue, verbal prompt, model, physical. And then you're going to reinforce immediately and naturally. You want to always give them what they ask for. You're going to pair it with that verbal praise. And this will help them strengthen their spontaneous communication. You're going to communicate your data and observations during your incidental teaching. Of all naturalistic teaching methods, I actually really like pivotal response training, which we'll do, but this one is very structured. It's a little more structured than others, and I like that. I prefer structure myself, but I've always enjoyed doing this, and lots of kids will respond well to this one. So here's a scenario. You might say, you place a favorite toy behind a clear barrier. The learner reaches or looks at the toy, and the instructor says, say ball to encourage the learner to request the toy. The learner attempts to say buh, and the instructor models ball. The instructor gives the learner the ball and says, you got the ball. Good job for asking. Then you would play with them with the ball. Getting the ball is a big part of the reinforcement, but also playing. Sometimes the child just wants it like to roll it by themselves for a couple minutes. That's fine. If that's their preference, they get their preference. But a lot of times they might want to play with you, and that is a big part of this. You should be a good playmate and very reinforcing to the person. So low initiations, you gotta change your setting and items. Usually, they're not motivated by what you have around the room. Is what happens. Which is just like, essentially, if you walk into your house and just use the toys they always have access to, that's why we're always looking for novel new toys. Construct at least less intrusive prompt hierarchy. So you want to pull your prompts away. They become prompt dependent. So they're only going to ask when you prompt. Their language isn't there where we can explain. With an older, more verbal child, you might be able to say, I'm going to prompt you when you don't respond right away. But if you respond by yourself, that would be better. And they understand that. But this, they can't understand. So they get this idea that they can only make requests if there's a prompt from you. And we don't want that. Over reinforcement, you want to make sure you're thinning reinforcement schedules, like you give them the ball and you play with them for 20 minutes, and that's very reinforcing. We would want to pull that back and make them request the ball again so you get more learning opportunities with that reinforcement. Make sure we have a good FBA, because when the behavioral challenges arise, you would move to that FBA and do whatever, the program states. So you want to move the settings eventually. So yeah, they request ball great in the living room with you and maybe the other behavior, but now we want them to request ball at school. Involve the caregivers. Train your caregivers to carry over this throughout the whole environment. Make sure you revisit incidental to reinforce the skills. Like we go back into an incidental play therapy phase. And then you want to link with other naturalistic methods to maximize that generalization. Okay, thank you, everybody.